So here we are, 2023, and we are considering self-portraits this time around, which is a little bit different from what we typically do. And you see the list of members who submitted work there on the left. Not everyone does, not everyone needs to. We love seeing everything that is offered every year. We do 2 exhibitions a year for those of you who aren't familiar with what we do. And I had an interesting exchange yesterday on the platform that we use because Susan Smith acknowledged the fact that what we do with these exhibitions, which are completely inclusive, there is no requirement other than having pictures that are decent enough in quality that we can put them in the catalog, which is what you're going to see here, which is also available on Amazon. We don't sell the catalog for a profit. We make it available so that people who are included in the exhibition can purchase at cost something that has their work in it, because I feel so strongly that that's a way of honoring what all of us are creating. And so this isn't the sort of exhibition that involves competition. It's not the sort of exhibition that involves fear about whether your work is good enough, hopefully, although that still enters in, as you might even see in the work. But I wrote to Susan and everyone who sees Circle, everyone who makes work from the heart deserves an opportunity to see their work in a beautiful professional format. Self-publishing allows us to eliminate the guard dog at the door of creativity for all. And by the way, on your Zoom platform, there should be a place where you can actually, it's sometimes at the top, where you can enlarge the images as I go along and look at them. But there are so many beautiful images here that deserve more attention. I'm going to encourage you to go to our website where this will be published as a link so that you can look at the work again. And of course, within CST, our members will have an opportunity to see the work in several different permutations once we're have completed today. So first up is Zoe. And sometimes when I wasn't quite sure about a work, I did write to the artist and ask. And I just wanted to remember what her symbolism was. And she wrote, "I created this image as a reminder of how much I've grown and where I'm trying to get to. Canary started out as what I was." And if you're familiar with the canary in the coal mine was what they used to determine whether or not there were noxious gases that would kill the human beings. She says, "That's sort of how I started out. But now, as a way to be kinder to myself, I feel the canary has grown into becoming an eagle in spirit." And she has all kinds of symbolic elements built into her body of work. And I do encourage you to look at her pieces in more detail if you have the time. Zet Bear, nature child. For those of you who are new to this, we all have a child archetype, and sometimes it can be a nature child, sometimes it's a magical child, sometimes it's a damaged child. But in any event, we all explore as part of CST the child that feels most relevant to us. And this is a beautiful example of using symbolism, the cardinals, the map, and the chrysanthemums, which are a sign of hope, and the butterflies, which are a sign of emergence. So that when you're looking at this work, I hope you will recognize that most of these artists, if not all of these artists, have thought very carefully about the elements that they combine in order to tell their own personal story represented by the idea of the self-portrait. Vicky established a very successful preschool early in her career. And what I love about this ascension is that it references in so many beautiful ways the child archetype, because I'm sure that if children were standing around this piece on a pedestal, they would be completely enthralled by it. And Vicki Fincham has done an amazing job of combining several elements here, including the printing, which represents the facets, literally, and the image that she printed on organza and combined in this also delightful piece that shows us so many sides of her. Tracy Urban, Woman Made of Words. Another wonderful, and by the way, for those of you who might not realize it, this month or this year, our attention is to collage. And so what you're seeing are, in most cases, collages that have been created as a response to prompts. And this is a response to a prompt. And what I love when someone like Tracy combines the words and the visuals is that these have come together beautifully together so that each contributes to the overall story. Suzanne Evanson has created a very quiet contemplative piece, which might be an indication of the introvert. Sitting by water brings me peace. Notice the use of her monochromatic color scheme, which is especially effective on this piece. Susan Smith, Magic in the Garden. And as you go through this, if you have the opportunity to do so again, really do zero in on the elements that have been included on some of these pieces because they're very complex. So magic for her is obviously the garden and the butterflies and the birds and the gorgeous sky. Susan Serez, and we do this, I should say, Wayne lays this all out, and he does it alphabetically because of the kind of program that we use. But what I find are these wonderful serendipitous relationships. And so here we have another beautiful sky in this piece by Susan Serez, head in the clouds, the sky, and then these amazing, which is so reminiscent of or references so well how we all feel about textiles and the gorgeous fabrics that have been used to create this lovely face. Susan Lane, Happiness Is, and this is Happiness Is. What an exuberant, ebullient face she has created here. And I also want to mention the gorgeous drape around this piece, which gives it so much more emphasis and just makes me remember what it was like, oh, so many years ago, to be out at night with a beautiful flowy dress, dancing to Ella Fitzgerald. And yet here we have another very serene countenance in Susan Goldie's piece. And so you see how these artists have been so sensitive to the presence that they portray in the pieces that they've created in this forest bathing. This tells us so much about Susan without any words at all. Sue Gilliland, retired, I think she says on Circle, almost retired art teacher. And yet if you read what she's put in the star there, me, the art teacher, Matisse, Van Gogh, Miro, clay, cut, paste, draw, paint, smile. What could be a better mantra for someone who taught art to children? And what beautiful, what different, or what better representative could there be in this piece of her? And Stephanie, I loved it that here we had 4 or 5 really close-up portraits in a row, and they're also different from each other, and yet they're also effective. And this is very effective, but if you close in on this, you can see that even though she has the smile on her face and she's got these protector birds and flowers around her. When you look at the text in the background, it's an indication of what we go through that we don't necessarily acknowledge. Your tomatoes will grow a fungus. Your cat will get run over. Someone will leave the bag with the ice cream melting in the car. And all of that is just another wonderful way to look at these self-portraits and discover through your own detective nature that there is more to the story than what the original or the first take on that collage might be. Sonia Lee Austin, another very subtle piece from Sonia. She was on our cover last year. Who Lives? And here we have an ultrasound. I know she had a very traumatic experience and now has, I think he's 8, wonderful son. And we've all had some experience of that challenge and how it has shaped us as human beings and mothers when it's appropriate or true, and also as artists. Cheryl Miller has a little bit different approach in hers, and this will come up again in other work that we'll see shortly. But this is really when I looked at that X on Cheryl's work, I thought she's zeroing in on who she is, and all of that around the X is the stuff that she loves that has shaped her. And yet, isn't this true as we age, that we, or maybe age isn't the right word, as we distill into who we are and get some clarity around it? That's what the X represents, and the very clear image of who she is within that X. Jean Hoskin is a colorist par excellence, has spent her career studying and explaining color. And so, of course, her piece would be entitled Life in Color. And yet she's worked with very subtle colors here. And this is a digital collage that was created with a couple of different apps. And as part of understanding that for me, it was an understanding of how much richer it is when we delve under the surface or into the surface, and we don't stay up on the surface where all the bright colors are. We're willing to look a little bit deeper into the value and the tones and the shades of who we are, because that's where the richness really is. Sarah Mayo is another, I use that word again, par excellence, at combining mixed media assemblage elements into pieces that tell really visual poetry is what these are. And this is her Parisian memoirs, or maybe memories. And she just does a beautiful job of pulling together elements that we might not see a relationship until she has pointed it out to us. Sally is a relatively new member of CST. I think this is her first year. And here she has explored the nature's child, or the nature child. And what I loved when I looked closely at this, which you will have to do in your own time, I wish I could zero in and enlarge each of these and talk about them. But some of the things I want to point out in this particular piece are the birds, the chickadee, which is obvious there in the detail, but also the dolphins that are leaping through her amazing hair, and the animals that are below in some sort of really interesting configuration that I myself, I don't know where she got that image or how she added it, but it's so effective. And Penny Fine, what I love most about this piece, Embrace Yourself. Well, I'll read it to you in case you can't see it on your own screen. Find creative ways to challenge the status quo by embracing self-expression and celebrating your, looks like the final line, which is behind the lips, unique, I'll fill in, self. And what I found really appealing when I looked at this for the 6th or 7th time, which is how long it takes me to process it, is that we all wish we had more hands. So we don't even care sometimes about embracing ourselves with all those hands as much as we wish we had that many hands so we could get that much more accomplished. She's done a really wonderful, and I know her interest is in surrealism. She's done a wonderful job of representing that and sharing it with us here. Now, I want you to look at this expression on Paula's face. It's a really beautiful, enigmatic is the word that came to mind. And the title is Be Brave and Soar. And isn't that the challenge that many of us strive to rise toward, to be brave and soar in our creativity? And we look to, she could be looking to someone older and wiser. She could be looking to the heavens. She could be looking at trees. She could be looking at all kinds of things. But the point is, we all have to find our inspiration in order to soar. And then perhaps the wings will emerge. And now this expression, I love, as I said, Wayne lays it out according to, the order of the alphabetical order. So we had that look on Paula's face, and now we have this amazing piece from Pamela Cole with another look that is a distinctly recognizable look there. And I love the title, Warning, Self-Portrait. And she's doing this selfie thing, right? And yes, we soar and we find ourselves, and then we have every right and ability to look with fierce eyes at the world around us and embrace and challenge it. And this from Orna, who is also, I think, a new member this year, the magical wishing child. And so here we have the magical child, and on the left, her head in the clouds, riding the wishing horses, the days melt away. And then you see in the detail, as you wish. If wishes were horses, the beggars would ride, is the nursery rhyme that I remember. But we're all entitled, as she has so beautifully displayed here, those wishes and the opportunity to pursue them. Now, one thing I know about Nori is that she's incredibly committed to the environment, and actually undertook, it might have been the first year that she was involved in CST, or maybe I've lost track of time, a large kind of a rehabilitation of a property drainage thing that she owned. But this just reminded me of that, because life among the pollinators means settling into the world around you and accepting and embracing that in many ways we are all one. And we need all of those creatures in order to make the environments around us so beautiful. Nan Travers, another nature child, pushing nature's boundaries. And I think we can all have sort of an immediate reaction to the innocence of this piece. But she's also done a wonderful, very inspired to add the eco-printed fabrics and papers that are part of the box that this child is pushing away from. And isn't that really the message and the wish, is that we can retain that innocence in the world that we occupy. Nan Sorensen, Buckeye, Arizona. If you just look at the face on the right, it looks slightly filled with dismay. But when you look at the left, the full one, you see the grandchildren, and you see the delight, and you see all of that gathered together in a way that is part of the enriching experience of Nan's self-portrait. a quiet poetic piece from Michael Ann, The Ancestral Moon. I wondered about this, and I did not write to her and ask her whether this is a wolf, but it strikes me as a wolf. And it may be that the wolf is her familiar, but I know from knowing Michael Ann that all animals matter to her, and that animals are her familiar, her accompaniment on the planet. And she has done a beautiful job of giving us another example of visual poetry where we contemplate the child and the animal and the majesty of the moon. I wrote to Marilyn White and said, could you just help me out with this, because I don't understand how it's a self-portrait. And I'm never dismissive. I want to understand, and I want to understand in a way that I can share. And she wrote this: I know this piece doesn't reflect a typical self-portrait, but it's a statement about me. I was inspired by the beautiful quote from Leonard Cohen, "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." I'm a quiet, reserved person, and the dark is a testament to how I was feeling during the pandemic until I happened upon CST. And now I feel the opening of such a wonderful world of creativity. It's inspired me and helped me to see myself in the light. And that light is the yellow flash that goes across this piece. Marilyn Pittman Waite, Transformation, 1992. Marilyn is a deep thinker and a writer and poet and artist, and used the symbol of the butterfly, which is a universal symbol of transformation, really beautifully here against the busy sketch, or the busy, maybe that's not the right choice of words, but the sketch, the rough sketch. We've got here the combination of the roughness of life and the beautiful transformation of the butterfly. Marion Rich, also a first-year member, self-portrait. And Marion is a clown and a creative genius. And in this piece, I just looked at it and I laughed, because it's the big, full head of creativity being balanced out by that child's body, because we need both. We need that innocence and delight of childhood and the intellectual sixth chakra ability to analyze and figure out what else to do in order to make the most of our creative impulses. Now, Lynn Lee, this is so interesting. A lot of people worked very small because that was sort of the nature of what we suggest. But Lynn Lee never goes small. She goes big, or she goes home. And in this self-portrait, C'est moi, this is her queen. This is her queen archetype. And of course, it needed to be 76 inches by 66 inches, because when you've got a queen, it's going to occupy all the space in the room. And she's done it so beautifully here in her classic style. And I just love that playful look on the queen's face, and I love her crown. And isn't it interesting in the way that things unfold, that then we have a very contemplative piece, which I believe we can all relate to, from Linda Wingrove. For a moment, I forgot who I am. We've all had that moment of looking out over a landscape that could be considered bleak and feeling as though we're only a shadow of ourselves. And capturing that moment and recognizing it is an important part of engaging with your creativity. and starting to think about how to come back from that particular point without rejecting it. Lynn Bainbridge. This is one that if you look at this again, or you've got a moment now, you might enlarge, because there's so much happening on the left. Everything begins with mind. And she has family and war and love and home and joy. Such an important reminder. And it's so characteristic of Lynn herself, but it's such a characteristic reminder that our thoughts have power. And how wonderful to share that in a self-portrait so that others can embrace that idea in their own lives. This one really made me smile, from Lucy Snyder. Lucy in the Sky with Seashells. It's terrific. And excuse me, down on the right there, it says, Lucy, you got some splaining to do. So I'm not sure, she never has said to me, I didn't even think to ask her which archetype this is, but by God, that would be my rebel. Jane, you got some splaining to do. And me sort of flicking them off. And so I wonder if that's what she had in mind here. But she's also hugely connected to the ocean and the beach. And so I love it when someone continues in that same vein as some of the other pieces they've shared with the membership. And of course, Lisa's piece graces our cover on the catalog, which is always a really, really hard choice to make. But I let the designer make the final decision, and it was Wayne's decision, and this is the one that he selected, and we were so thrilled with how it looked when we got our copy from Amazon. Contemplating. And from a collage standpoint, you know, the other thing I love about this is that apparently is actually a garden pot, the head, but it just goes to show you, with a really creative spirit, how you can take all kinds of images, especially for those artists who are working digitally, and drop out backgrounds and recombine them in ways that are just breathtaking. And this piece from Lisa Jenny made me think about how many pieces in the exhibition feature photographs where the look on the person's face, in this case, Lisa as a child, is so filled with resolve and confidence. And the title is Awaiting Uncertain Times. And without talking to Lisa or getting an artist statement, which we did not have room to include in the catalog, we don't really know what that means to her. But I found great satisfaction in looking at these photographs where we all at one point in our lives, we all had a very clear sense of, many of us, I can't say all, great sense of resolve about dealing with the uncertain times. And this from Lindsay Webster, a talented silkscreen artist and artist in so many venues. Is That Me? It's a small piece with huge power. And I love the drawing that she did here. I love the collaging of the hair elements and I know it's not a flower, it's a succulent, but I don't remember what it's called, and the dress and all of that. It's one more example of a very poetic interpretation of herself. And she and I correspond frequently, and she said, I don't think it's good enough, and I don't think it's done. And I thought, that's exactly the point. Is that me? We always think we're not good enough and we're not done, but we are. And again, how about this as a follow-up? Linda Dawson, I never count sheep. Mainly digital, but with stitching. And that serene look on Linda's face and the printing around. To be beautiful means to be yourself.
Safe drive.
You don't need to be accepted by others. You just need to accept yourself. And with a little luck, that's the realization that we come to. Laura Beeler, the pretty one. Laura and I have talked several times and laughed about the fact that with three sisters, she does and I do, we sort of got labels. And she was the pretty one. And what I love about this isn't that she was the pretty one. What I love about this is that her eyes are wide open and she looks full of expectancy and creative joy. And she has surrounded herself, again, butterflies are a frequent element that pops up in these, and that is a sign of creative redemption and exploration and emergence. I wrote to Kim because I wasn't sure about how she titled this. I thought maybe there should be a break between a and way, so that the title might be She Explores a Way Up. And she wrote back, which I love, no, she explores a way up. And I thought, I love that. And she said, it's because I was always a little bit of a rebel. And that certainly is evidenced in this piece. Kate Dean, Forest Bathing. Notice that the body is against all those intellectual things that we learn and the words and all of that. And yet Kate has been immersed in an awful lot of that her entire life. And yet what's waiting for her outside that particular framework is the beautiful array of greens that represent nature and the forest. Karen is a beloved member who lives in Austria and shows up for as many calls as she can, bless her heart. Several of our international members do this, and I'm always so grateful for them. What I love about this self-portrait is that the writing that she's done is not a language that I can read, but we all know what that feels like inside our heads, and she's portrayed it beautifully in this piece. Karen Sophia Smith, we looked at this piece together in another setting, and at that time she was a little concerned that it was too busy and that it didn't feel quite right. But on second thought, looking at it and evaluating it, she realized that each of those areas wasn't just some busy distraction for her. It was actually all the parts of what she does and how she engages that lead her to be able to say proudly and proclaim, really, I love life. And so she finished the piece as you see it here, and it does completely portray that feeling, I love life. Karen McCann, another image that includes the women from the past who have helped shape Karen. Who am I? And you see there her mother and an aunt, if I remember correctly, possibly a sister. I should have written it down, Karen. I apologize now, but it is undeniable that we all have these family members and others, not always family, not always women, who've influenced us and impacted who we become. And there you can see in the detail some of the other elements that are particularly important in shaping who Karen is. I've looked at this piece numerous times, and I finally wrote to Karen and I said, I want to understand the words says convergence, and then it says new material only. And she said, in describing myself, I feel like many things I want to do, the materials I have on hand and the new ideas swirling around converge in creative projects or life choices, but there's always a conflict between my desire to use new materials and new ideas and the requirement to focus on practicing the new discipline, whatever it is. So a beautiful portrayal of that sort of conflict and hopefully centering. Karen Collette Frank, I carry them with me, daughter of Ovaline and daughter of Coletta. And one thing that struck me about this piece is that it's a really beautiful use of black and white. There is no color to be a distraction, and yet it's extremely effective because we can focus on the figures and on the history. Joanne Hoffman, another approach, what makes me me? Harkening back to Cheryl Miller and the surrounding of the portrait with all of the elements that contribute to who that particular artist is. Jeanette Floyd always amazes us with her technical artistry. And here she has created each of these leaves of hair individually and added them together in a proud, gorgeous portrait of being the woman that she is. And nice use of complementary colors too, Jeanette, by the way. Janice Updike Walker, Magical Only Child, tribute to her child and to the importance, I think, what I love about this, knowing Janice and her archetypes, is the importance that our children play and the stages in their lives play in the stages of our own lives. Janet Darcher, wonderful use of spoonflower fabric. That's a photo by the artist on the left turned into spoonflower fabric with that amazing portrait. This is so reminiscent of images of the green man or woman that I have seen in the past, and really references her nature child. Jackie Manley, Life is Messy, but Look into the Windows of My Soul. You see all those windows, and Jackie is a complex, wonderful person with a lot of windows. And behind all those windows is the messiness, and who cannot relate to that and the interpretation that she has shared with us here. Ginny Ewers has been working on her personal geology and excavating all of that for as long as she has participated in CST. This one's called Beneath the Surface. And if you look closely at the black and white areas, you'll see there are photographs and words that are related to Ginny, but what still shines through and distills beautifully is the essence of who she is in that circle. Esther Collins, self-portrait. This is a digital piece and represents several different photographs of Esther that have been combined. Again, interesting to me how many of us used flowers and butterflies as signs of emergence. But as I mentioned earlier, the intensity of the gaze, the solid commitment of the gaze, is one of the things that has impressed me throughout this exhibition when someone like Esther used a photograph. Also true with Beth Salvia. Beth's been working a lot with collage this year in her own way. This is her own self-portrait, and in case you can't read what's written on the piece, the hero is by virtue of her sex made, unmade, and made over again. Crucified, resurrected, uplifted, and empowered. Notice the bird on her arm there. By her city, despite her city, of her city. She is her city. And we are ourselves creatively, each of us, unto ourselves. Beautiful, poetic representation of that. Ellie Zimmer, My Creative Soul. We see everything Ellie cares about here, and the eyes remain innocent and are looking out at it in ways that just make me think she can hardly wait to get started and engaged again. And she recently broke her hip, so I'm sure she's really, really wanting to engage again soon. Elaine Ross, another beautiful nature child piece that is also reminiscent of the Green Man. I don't know whether there's a green woman, but if there isn't, this should be it. The color and the representation of the elements couldn't be any better than it is right here. Denise also, self-portrait. Your dearest wish will come true. I love seeing words incorporated into these collages because it furthers the message. Sometimes it's not needed, but it's always really interesting when an artist chooses to do that. Excuse me, I had to get a drink. And look at the resolve in those eyes. Your dearest wish will come true. This is where we focus on what we would really like to achieve. We move forward, we step back, we move forward again. We stay in community and we do not give up on ourselves. Delancey, I think this is Delancey's first year too. And this is a wonderful inner child piece. The joy, the color, the exuberance. I don't know whether she was inspired by Matisse, and who the hell cares? She was inspired by herself. We don't have to have some other older artist or dead artist to inspire us. We can figure it all out on our own and go with the color and the pattern and have just as fabulous a result. Cindy Peterson, another kind of exuberance, clowning around. Cindy works with digital portraiture, and this is a wonderful example, equally colorful, of that. Christine Barker, another more collage sort of, and it's so well titled, All of Me. And Christine, I'll just share a little bit of what she wrote. I cringed when another person, this was in a Wednesday get together, mentioned she thought her self-portrait was turning into a poster, so she didn't submit it. Uh-oh, I thought, but I kept looking at my poster and I've discovered there's something interesting about the placement of the various elements. Myself is offset from the middle, but it's surrounded by landscapes that are important to me, threads and tea and fruit and colors. She has red shoes. And so this is where we have to be really careful not to judge ourselves, because however we do it is how we do it. And if she had this assignment, although they're not really assignments, to do again next year, she might approach it quite differently, but it would still work. Carol Labori, Out of the Ashes. Carol has sustained all, as haven't we all kinds of difficult situations in life. And I love that she represented it here in such a poignant, vulnerable way. Because sometimes when someone else looks at a piece of work like this, it triggers a response for them that can be a healing response. And that would be the best of both worlds. Now, here's a different approach to vulnerability, but Beth Frisbee Wallace, Big Decisions. When you study this piece, there is a certain amount of vulnerability in it as well, and change that's really only alluded to. And so what I love about artwork in general, but specifically about these collages that have been shared, is that the artist is the one who knows the full story, and what they choose to share, he or she chooses to share, can be interpreted more universally by the audience or the viewer. And interestingly enough, I felt this followed in that same vein from Barb Sorge. Am I the person my dog thinks I am? There's a real vulnerability in wondering whether other human beings see you as positively as your dog sees you. And I have to admit, I've entertained that question more than once. Barb Corso-eyed. I don't see any wrinkles, do you? When I first looked at this, I didn't necessarily think of vulnerability, but then when I went through the presentation several times, I couldn't help but feel that this had its own vulnerability too. And it's partly because of the look in the eyes on this piece. I think she's saying, tell me you don't see any wrinkles. Tell me life isn't going to change. Tell me my friend isn't going to move away. And that's the hardest thing. A self-portrait is a moment in time. And then it changes, which is why you could do a self-portrait every month and they would all be different. You know what's so great about this, Barb Kaiser? Magical child. Look at the look in the little girl's eyes, and then look at the look in her adult eyes on the right. This is the same look. This is the beauty of what we can do when we engage with our creative selves. We can keep that magical child, that nature child, that child, whoever it is. We can keep nurturing them. We can keep looking at the world, which is so rough around us, with eyes of innocence. Anne Lee, here am I. You can't necessarily see the embroidered letters on the left-hand side unless you enlarge it, but this is another approach to a montage of photographs that represent Anne's life. And what better words to use than here am I, and share those in a visual form so that the viewer can fully appreciate all the facets. Back to Vicki Fincham, the facets of who I am. There are lots of ways to express the facets of who we are. Alison Bainbridge, triptych, me, myself, and I. When I looked at this piece the first time, I was so struck by the lyrical nature of it and was reminded of Kandinsky and music and color as elements of our soul. And so I think Alison has done a wonderful job here of using embroidery and color and fabric selection to show us three sides of herself, which are colorful and poetic and run deep. Alice Rehnquist, another version. You know, it's so amazing to me how these follow one on another. This one's a blind contour drawing of me, number one. And she's done a gorgeous job of using the real flowers on the right, the interpreted painted flowers around the features, and her drawing. And in many ways, she and Alison should have a two-person show because their styles so perfectly complement each other. Al Bates Lombard, look at the eyes. The poignancy of the eyes really got to me on this one, Al. Another nature child, more butterflies and flowers, and a real sense of persevering through back to, let's see, Marilyn White's piece and the Leonard Cohen quote, the cracks are where the light gets in. And the use of all those cracks makes me think this is where the light is entering into this piece and into you. You know, we do the catalog starting with A some years and starting with Z some years so that nobody's ever totally at the end. But here we wrap up with my dear Gigi Medeiros and her work in progress. Kept writing to her and saying, have you got a final photo for me? And she kept saying, I'm still working on it. And I thought, in the long run, I thought, that's so perfect. The designer might have trouble with that, meaning Wayne, but I don't have trouble with that because everything is a work in progress. And this is a beautiful example of her drawing skills and her embroidery skills. And all I can say is I can hardly wait to see what this piece looks like when it's finished. But it has the exuberance that we all know to be true of Gigi. And this, I don't know whether you've got a hedonist, Gigi, but this sure speaks of pleasure and hedonism and celebration. And so what a perfect way to wrap up the catalog. Thank you to everyone who contributed. And of course, if you're interested in having an actual hands-on copy, you can certainly go to Amazon. But I'm just delighted that you were here looking at it with me today. And Sue's holding up a copy of it right there.